Hey everyone, welcome to another video. I didn't think I'd be actually making this video today because with a lot of indie features they take so long to come out in Australia, but one that has been on my radar for a while, When You Finish Saving the World, directed by Jesse Eisenberg, was one that caught my eye for a long time, and I have finally seen it and I really want to talk about it with you guys. So let's get into it. I'll let you know before I go any further as well that while I won't be talking full spoilers, I do go into a lot of details with this movie. So if you want to kind of go in blind, just know that I do recommend this movie to you. It is definitely an interesting watch. But
you have been warned.
So a little bit of fun history. A24, who distributed this film, were known as the coming of age drama studio before they went on and did all of these insane horror movies, which is what they're predominantly known for now. And I quite like those films that fall under A24 in that genre. One that is really close to my heart is mid-90s, the directorial debut from Jonah Hill. And this kind of felt like it was following in that kind of path a little bit, with an actor becoming a first-time director, doing a coming-of-age story, following someone in their very formative years and the kind of relationships that they have and exploring that. Mid-90s is a film that connects to me on a real personal level, and I was really hoping that this would too. From the trailer, it looked like it had a lot of really nice moments to it that I think I could really latch onto, which just really drew me into this and made me probably a little bit more excited than what a lot of people were, because this thing did not make a lot of money and it didn't really review too well. It had a very mixed reaction from many people. So this film follows a mother played by Julianne Moore and her teenage son played by Finn Wolfhard, who can't really seem to connect, yet they try to find a bond with other people. She latches onto a young boy she meets at her women's shelter that she works at, while her son falls in love with an extremely political student at his school. That is what the synopsis reads for this movie. That is a fairly accurate description of what this movie really is. But I want to dig a little bit deeper than that and really explore what actually made this film really enjoyable to me, because I did like this film quite a lot and found a lot to connect to, even though this does have quite a few flaws, which I'll definitely get into. So I think that, yes, they can't really seem to connect. That is true. But the beauty of it is they're a lot more closer than what they'd like to believe. Finn Wolfhard's character and Julianne Moore's character, they're both very selfish people, and they both want to leave their mark on the world. They want to make some kind of positive difference. Now, what splits them apart is that Finn Wolfhard's Ziggy is kind of lost. He is a teenager in high school. He hasn't figured it all out yet, and he's kind of just following people who he thinks are cool. Well, Julianne Moore is completely on the other side, where she has all of these ideals. She knows exactly what she wants out of people. She has these very high expectations and believes in them, and that puts a lot of pressure on some of the characters in this film. And Finn Wolfhard's Ziggy seems like he's kind of jaded by that, and their relationship has become real strained. They're constantly arguing. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of mother-son relationships throughout those teenage years when you're trying to figure out who you are. Another thing is Ziggy is wrapped up in a lot of his own ego. He has this following on social media, kind of like this Twitch platform where he plays music to a bunch of people. And that really doesn't translate to the outside world. He's kind of seen as a normal kid by everyone else, but on the internet, he thinks that he's some kind of star, and he has this ego in a lot of ways, and that gets him into a lot of trouble in this film at points. I really like how it played with that, because it seems like while he does have this connection with so many people online, he kind of fails to realize that the more and more that he gets sucked into that world, the more he becomes disconnected from some of the people that are really important in his life, like his mother and his father. Now, Julianne Moore, she really latches onto this kid that she kind of sees a lot of her son in him, and he seems like he's willing to work with her a little bit more than Ziggy. And because of that, she kind of becomes very forward with him And I think the way that this is written is a little bit janky. I think this is where one of the first weaknesses of this film come into play, because while I think Eisenberg had some really good intentions with this arc, and I think it does work for the most part, it does come off a little bit awkward, and she kind of borderlines on being creepy throughout the film. I don't know if that was intended, but it just didn't feel right in the context of what was really happening. I feel like it was something where, yes, she is being very forward and trying to make a connection. Having all of that being explored is really wonderful, yes, but the way it's executed just doesn't quite come off right to me. And I think that could be a stylistic choice from Jesse Eisenberg, because you've seen him as an actor. He's kind of quirky, and he's kind of putting that into this film here. And it hits and misses at points. I don't really think it works all that well with Julianne Moore's character, but I think it works quite well with Finn Wolfhard's character, because he's kind of this goofball. He hasn't got it all figured out yet. All he knows is that he just wants to play all this music and build a following, and he tries to connect that with this kind of love interest that he has. But as you probably know, combining two things like that just doesn't really work. There is a massive disconnect between the real world and the internet, and it kind of breaks down a lot in this film. And I really like the way that that was really explored. And the film doesn't want to force him into a romance. It's showing that he is trying to make a connection, yes, but as a high school kid, when you've got a crush like that, sometimes you're drawn to someone who just isn't right for you, and it kind of explores that, I think, in a very poignant and very relatable way in a lot of aspects. Now, the ending of this film, which I won't go into too much detail on, I thought was really touching. It was really beautiful, heartwarming, and a little bit heartbreaking as well. It is also kind of ambiguous, and I can understand how that could frustrate a lot of people, but I think it's made clear enough what has happened and where these characters are headed, and once again, I think it was really touching. Also, just on a side note, I think the musical choices were really well done too. Emile Mosseri was composing this film. He's actually one of my favorite up-and-coming composers, having done scores for The Last Black Man in San Francisco and Minari, which are both phenomenal scores. And he does some pretty great work here too. Now, I haven't gone too far into Jesse Eisenberg's direction yet. And as you know, on this channel, I do like to talk about directors. His style is kind of interesting, yet kind of bland at the same time. The camera movement is fine. It fits the genre nicely. It's nothing too flashy. But yet again, this is an indie film. So maybe if he's given a larger budget, he can probably do a little bit more with that. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt there. There's a couple of nice panning shots, but other than that, nothing that really stands out. The color palette is pretty bland. It looks like it's shot on film, which is always a nice choice, but other than that, I won't really remember too many images that this film has presented. However, what really shines in terms of his style is the way that he writes dialogue. As I mentioned before, he writes dialogue kind of like the way he acts, which doesn't really sit right with a ton of people, but it also connects with a bunch of people. It's a bit of a divisive kind of way of approaching a film. It has good intentions for sure, but it can make these characters feel very unlikable. And I think another reason why this was so mixed from a lot of people was because of that. Some people found it pretty hard to connect with Finn Wolfhard's character and Julianne Moore's character. I could kind of excuse that within the context of this film, because they're both in a pretty difficult place in their own lives, and they're both kind of lost, so I can understand why they're not the happiest people or the most friendliest. But if you are looking for a character to really connect to like that, that is seen as a good person, you're kind of not going to get that here, and you're ultimately going to be left pretty unsatisfied by the journey that this wants to take the characters on, because it kind of asks you to feel for them, and if it fails at that, it really fails in how it's going to hit you. Now, as I mentioned, I think there are a couple of faults with Julianne Moore's character. However, I think she gives a great performance. I think the problem lies within how this character is written. I think if it was written a little bit better, as I said, to make it feel like, yes, she has good intentions, but she's not coming off as really creepy, and just psychotic in a lot of ways. I think that we would be able to feel a lot more for her character. As I mentioned, I felt a lot more for Finn Wolfhard's character because that style of writing does fit a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid in high school, because that's the way that a lot of dudes are in high school. With Julianne Moore's character as this mother who is quite mature in a lot of ways, but is a little bit lost, I think that it just doesn't click right. And I found a lot of faults with a lot of scenes featuring her at points just because it's just written so inconsistently, and it was kind of frustrating. Also, there's been a little bit of talk about just the political nature of the film. There are a couple of political moments in it, but I don't think it's trying to make a statement by any means, but because certain things get said, it kind of gets lumped in with the criticism of the film and talking about how these characters are privileged and everything like that. That may be the case, but that doesn't mean that this story isn't worth telling. People go through struggles like this all the time, and to shed light on that is why we have film at times. It's worth mentioning the issues that people have, whether they're internally, small, large. Guess what? To some people, problems like this mean the world to them. And does that mean that they're more privileged than others? Sure, but that does not mean that they're not worth exploring by any means. And I think that what this wants to talk about is worth mentioning and doesn't really get brought up a lot in some coming-of-age films. Overall, do I have faults with this movie? Do I see flaws? Absolutely. I don't think this is perfect. This is not one of A24's best coming-of-age dramas by any means. But I found a lot to love here. I overall did enjoy watching these characters. I could connect with them to some extent. And the situations that some of them are put in were moments that I could really easily connect with. Not one-to-one, of course, but just drawing from my own personal experiences. There were situations that felt really relevant and touched me on a real personal note that made this film kind of special in my eyes. If I had to give this film a score, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I actually think that When You Finish Saving the World is a great film that is worth your time. If you want to check out a nice little indie feature, it's a comfortable watch. I think that this is a safe, decent choice. I don't think that you would come out of this hating it. I think at the very least, you'd probably find it forgettable. And I think for a lot of people, that was the case for sure. I like this a little bit more because there were certain situations that just connected with me on a bit more of a deeper level and made me feel something by the end of this film, which I always have to give bonus points to. If you make me feel some kind of emotions in your film, that is always worth mentioning, and that always gets more points in my book because that is ultimately what some of these films are trying to accomplish. Anyway, those are my thoughts towards When You Finish Saving the World. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this movie. Have you seen it yet? I'd love to know where this stands on some of your favorite coming-of-age dramas from A24. Let me know. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.